You probably said it before. Given the right situation, I would never do that. You believe it. Most people believe it. But the real answer is far stranger, and it has nothing to do with who you think you are. In August of 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo turned a basement hallway at Stanford University into a fake prison. He wasn't testing prisons, he was testing you, or someone exactly like you. 24 ordinary young men screened for good mental health. No criminal history, nothing unusual. Half were randomly assigned to be guards. Half were assigned to be prisoners. Nobody was chosen because they were cruel or weak or dangerous. It was a coin flip, nothing more. Within 6 days, the experiment collapsed. Guards were forcing prisoners to do humiliating tasks. Prisoners were having breakdowns. One man cried so hard he had to be removed from the study. It was supposed to run 2 weeks. It didn't survive one, and out of that collapse came one of the most famous ideas in psychology. Good people placed in a bad situation will become the situation, not because they're broken, because the role rewires them. That idea spread everywhere. It showed up in textbooks, documentaries, courtrooms. It explained Nazi Germany. It explained Abu Ghraib. It explained office bullies and playground cruelty and every ordinary person who ever did something they later couldn't believe they did. The lesson felt airtight. Put a person in a costume of power, and the person underneath disappears, but here's the part almost nobody tells you. That story isn't quite what happened. Decades later, a French researcher named Thibault Letexier got access to the original audio recordings, the ones Zimbardo kept in his own archive for years. And what he found didn't match the legend. The guards weren't just falling into a role, they were coached. Zimbardo, acting as the prison's warden, gave them direct instructions on how to behave, how to create a sense of powerlessness, how to keep prisoners disoriented. One staff member is heard telling a guard to be tougher because the study wasn't producing dramatic enough results yet. This wasn't a spontaneous descent into cruelty. It was in part built, guided, rehearsed, almost. So was the whole thing a lie? Not exactly. Something real still happened in that basement. But it wasn't proof that situations turn anyone into a monster automatically. It was proof of something else, something quieter and honestly more useful to you. To understand what that something else is, you have to go back further, to a study that came before Zimbardo's, one that's less famous, but arguably more important. In the early 1960s, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram asked ordinary volunteers to deliver what they believed were painful electric shocks to a stranger, simply because a man in a lab coat told them to continue. Most obeyed, all the way to the highest voltage on the machine. Why? Not because they stopped being themselves, because they trusted the authority standing in the room with them, and they didn't feel personally responsible for the outcome. The lab coat did the moral work for them. Milgram called it the agentic state. You stop seeing yourself as the author of the action and start seeing yourself as an instrument of someone else's decision. Notice the difference between that and the popular version of the prison story. It's not that identity disappears under pressure. It's that identity gets handed off piece by piece to whoever is directing the scene. That's a small shift. It doesn't feel dramatic in the moment. You don't notice yourself changing, but it changes everything downstream because every action afterward gets filtered through someone else's permission instead of your own judgment. Fast forward to 2002, when two psychologists, Stephen Riker and Alexander Haslam, tried to redo Zimbardo's prison study for the BBC, this time with one crucial difference: no warden telling anyone how to act. The guards were left to figure things out entirely on their own. And here's what happened. They didn't turn cruel. They hesitated. They felt visibly guilty about having power over other people. Some tried to treat the prisoners as equals, sharing cigarettes, breaking rules meant to keep a hierarchy in place. Eventually, the whole guard structure started to collapse from the guard side, not the prisoner's side, because holding unearned power over another person made them uncomfortable enough that they stopped enforcing it. Left alone without a script, without someone modeling cruelty for them, ordinary people didn't automatically become tyrants. They mostly just felt the weight of it and tried to put it down. So which version is closer to true? The one where a costume erases your conscience the moment you put it on, or the one where people resist domination, unless someone actively, deliberately teaches them not to? The second one, and it's a much older story than any lab, any university basement, any decade of psychology journals. Go back further than experiments, further than universities, back to small human groups moving across open land tens of thousands of years ago. For most of human history, people lived in bands of maybe 30 to 50 individuals, and there was no formal police force, no court system, no jail cell waiting for the ambitious. So, how did those groups stop the biggest, strongest, most aggressive person from simply taking control of everyone else? Anthropologists who study these societies, including Christopher Boehm, who spent decades comparing hunter gatherer groups across different continents, found something remarkably consistent. These communities actively, constantly suppressed attempts at domination, gossip, public ridicule, exclusion from the group, sometimes something far more permanent. If someone tried to bully their way into lasting power, the group came down on them, hard and early, before that power could calcify into something unbreakable. This wasn't a nice cultural preference, something people did because it felt polite. It was survival machinery. A group that allowed one person to seize unchecked control was a group that could be marched into starvation, into needless war, into disaster, by the ego of a single man having a bad week. So, across thousands of generations, humans evolved something researchers now call an anti dominance instinct, not a guarantee against cruelty, a pressure against it, a quiet, persistent voice that says, "This isn't right. Someone should say something, this has gone too far." That instinct didn't vanish when humans built cities and job titles and security badges and uniforms. It's still fully wired into you. It's why something tightens in your chest when you watch someone abuse a position of power, even in a movie, even when it costs you absolutely nothing to just sit there and keep watching. That reaction isn't good manners you were taught at a dinner table. It's ancient circuitry doing exactly the job it was built to do, tens of thousands of years before Stanford, before psychology, before any of this had a name. So back to that basement in 1971, what actually happened there wasn't a costume silently erasing a conscience. It was a conscience being pressured, coached, and slowly worn down by an authority figure who badly wanted a specific, dramatic outcome for his research. That's not less disturbing than the popular myth. It's more disturbing in a completely different way, because it means cruelty inside institutions doesn't usually arrive on its own. Fully formed, the moment someone puts on a uniform, it's cultivated. Someone, somewhere is doing the coaching, even when nobody would ever call it coaching out loud. Think about how this actually shows up in the world you live in right now. A supervisor who quietly rewards the manager, who's harshest with staff, and slowly sidelines the one who pushes back. A workplace culture that treats empathy as weakness, one small joke at a time, until being decent starts to feel like a liability instead of a virtue. An online space where cruelty gets more attention, more likes, more reach than kindness ever does. So the loudest, harshest voice in the room quietly becomes the one everyone starts imitating without meaning to. Nobody in these situations hands you a costume. Nobody sits you down and tells you to become someone else. Something smaller and slower happens instead. Somebody normalizes it first. Somebody makes the unkind option feel expected, even smart. Somebody makes silence feel like the easier road to walk down. That's the actual mechanism, the one hiding underneath the popular myth. Not a switch that flips you into a different person the second you're handed authority. A slow, almost invisible erosion of the moment where you normally stop and ask yourself, wait, should I actually be doing this? Here's the strange comfort buried inside all of it. You're not one accident of circumstance away from becoming cruel. Riker and Haslam's guards prove that, left without a script to follow, most people default to discomfort with unearned power, not delight in wielding it. Boehm's decades of anthropological fieldwork prove that resisting domination is written into the species itself, not just scattered randomly through a few unusually good individuals. You're not fragile. You are, in a very real evolutionary sense, equipped. But equipment only matters if someone actually reaches for it and uses it. The guards who hesitated in that BBC study still had to act on their hesitation out loud in front of other people at some social cost to themselves. The instinct gives you the warning signal. It has never once acted for you. That part is still, and has always been, your responsibility alone. There's a reason the myth version of the Stanford story spread faster than the corrected one ever could. It's simpler. It lets you off the hook completely. If a role can erase you the instant you put it on, then nothing that happens under that role is really your fault, and nothing you do under different circumstances says anything about you at all. The truth is less comfortable and more empowering at the same time. You were never a blank costume waiting to be filled by whatever role life handed you. You walked into every version of that basement already carrying an instinct built over tens of thousands of years, one that was actively working against cruelty from the first moment the door closed. Zimbardo had to fight that instinct to get the outcome he wanted. He had to coach it out of people. That should tell you something about how deep it runs. It also means the myth got the warning sign backward. The danger was never a uniform on its own. The danger is a uniform combined with someone standing just behind your shoulder. quietly narrating what's expected of you until you stop noticing the narration is even happening. Watch for that voice wherever it shows up: in a manager's tone, in a group's unspoken rules, in the comment section that rewards the harshest reply with the most attention. That voice is doing exactly what Zimbardo did in that basement, just without the lab coat and the clipboard. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, given the right situation, I would never do that, don't throw the thought away completely, but don't fully trust it either. Ask yourself a better question instead. Not who am I deep down underneath everything. Ask who is currently telling me who to be right now in this room, in this group chat, in this meeting. And do I actually honestly agree with them? Because the real answer was never that a bad situation quietly turns good people into monsters. The real answer is that good people become genuinely dangerous the exact moment they stop asking that question.